I want to begin with something I don't often say this bluntly, because this subject demands a level of honesty that softer words can sometimes weaken. What I'm about to explain is not some simple idea of poetic justice, where someone hurts another person and eventually receives an equal punishment that somehow puts everything back into balance. Real life rarely gives us consequences that neat. What happens inside an avoidant after betraying someone they deeply valued is far more complicated and, in many ways, far more painful. When I say betrayal, I'm not talking only about the dramatic events people immediately associate with that word. I'm talking about the entire range of ways an avoidant can break emotional trust. It can be disappearing when vulnerability required closeness. It can be choosing silence when their presence mattered most. It can be moving between affection and distance, giving someone just enough warmth to make them believe in the connection, only to pull away and leave them questioning everything. It can be accepting someone's genuine love while refusing to offer the emotional honesty and consistency that such love deserves. Those things are betrayals too, even when the person committing them never sees them that way. And that lack of awareness is actually a major part of this entire psychological process. The person on the receiving end feels the betrayal deeply. Their body registers the inconsistency, the rejection, the confusion, and the emotional abandonment. But the avoidant may not understand the weight of what they are doing until much later. And by the time that understanding arrives, the consequences can be far deeper than anything an immediate confrontation could have created. To understand why this happens, we first have to understand something important. The avoidant often has no idea what they are actually risking. They may genuinely misunderstand the importance of the person standing in front of them. Not necessarily because they consciously think that person has little value, but because avoidant attachment can distort how emotional connection is perceived. It can make closeness feel less significant while it is available and make separation appear far easier than it actually is. That is one of the most painful contradictions within avoidant psychology. The very system that developed to protect someone from the pain of losing others can also prevent them from fully appreciating what they have before it is gone. The emotional walls that reduce the fear of loss can also block the ability to fully experience the value of connection. So an avoidant can stand in the presence of something rare, sincere, and deeply meaningful, while their own emotional defenses quietly convince them that it is not as important as it really is. This does not necessarily mean they are incapable of loving or recognizing value. It means their internal defenses can continually reduce the emotional information that would force them to confront just how much the relationship matters. And because of that distortion, they make decisions without truly understanding the stakes. They withdraw. They become inconsistent. They create emotional distance. They minimize problems. They convince themselves that things will remain available whenever they decide to return. They may believe the other person will continue waiting, continue loving, or somehow remain emotionally accessible despite everything. They don't realize what they're gambling with. What looks to them like something they can temporarily step away from may actually be something they will never be able to replace. What they assume can survive unlimited neglect may eventually become something that cannot be recovered. And their own emotional defenses can keep them from recognizing that reality until it is too late. The real reckoning usually does not happen at the exact moment the betrayal occurs. It often comes much later. That delay is extremely important because it changes the entire emotional experience for the avoidant. Immediately after the relationship breaks down, or after they pull away, their protective mechanisms are usually operating at full strength. Their mind begins organizing the experience into something that feels manageable. They may minimize what happened, reinterpret the relationship, focus on its flaws, or convince themselves that leaving was necessary. From the outside, This can look almost disturbingly easy. It can look as though they walked away without feeling anything, as though the relationship meant very little, as though the person they hurt was simply replaced by distance and silence. And this is often the part that devastates the person who genuinely loved them. They are left carrying the grief, replaying conversations, questioning their worth, wondering how someone who once seemed so connected could suddenly behave as though the entire relationship was disposable. But what appears to be emotional freedom on the surface does not necessarily reflect what is happening underneath. Sometimes the avoidant is not free from the connection at all. They are simply protected from fully feeling it, for now. And that distinction becomes incredibly important when the defenses eventually begin to weaken. I've talked about this before, but I want to return to it because it remains one of the most painful misunderstandings in avoidant relationship dynamics. What looks like indifference from the outside is often not indifference at all. It can be the result of an emotional defense system working at full strength. An avoidant may appear calm, detached, and completely unaffected after hurting someone. But that calmness does not necessarily mean they feel nothing. Sometimes it means they cannot safely allow themselves to feel everything yet. Their mind is using every defense it has to keep the full reality of what happened and what they may have lost from becoming emotionally overwhelming. The composure can actually be a form of protection, but those defenses are not unlimited. Eventually, reality begins pushing through them, and usually something specific triggers that shift. Undeniable proof that the person they betrayed is truly gone from the role they once occupied in their life. Sometimes that proof is simply your absence. Not the fresh absence of someone who has just walked away, but the settled absence of someone who has genuinely moved forward, someone who has stopped waiting, someone who has taken the emotional energy they once invested in the avoidant and redirected it toward themselves, their future, and their own life. That kind of absence feels different. The avoidant may have always carried the assumption that the door was still somewhere in the background. They might have believed they could return someday, reconnect, or find you emotionally available if they ever decided they wanted closeness again. Then, quietly, that possibility disappears. There is no announcement, no dramatic final scene. They simply realize that your life has continued without them. You are building something new, becoming more grounded, more confident, more alive. And there is no longer a place in that life reserved for their eventual return. That is often when something inside them begins to change. The reality they once treated as temporary suddenly becomes permanent. Sometimes the trigger is even more direct. They see you again, hear about you, come across something you shared, or encounter you through some unexpected circumstance. And the person they see is no longer the person they remember. You seem calmer, stronger, more complete. The self-respect that may have been developing quietly after the relationship is now fully established, and the avoidant can see it without the emotional filters that once allowed them to minimize your importance. That is when the real reckoning can begin. And I want to describe this carefully because there are two easy ways to misunderstand it. One is to turn it into a revenge story where the avoidant is supposedly destroyed by losing you. The other is to make it so comfortable that the consequences become meaningless. Neither one tells the whole truth. The first stage is mental clarity. For perhaps the first time, the avoidant begins evaluating the relationship with a much more accurate understanding of what it actually meant. This is not simply sentimental nostalgia. It can be surprisingly sharp and uncomfortable. They begin seeing you without the emotional reduction that previously made the loss easier to tolerate. They remember your depth, your emotional intelligence, the way you understood things they rarely explained, the way you could see beyond the image they presented and recognize the person underneath it. They remember the patience you showed, the chances you gave, and the fact that your patience was never weakness.
it was strength. Qualities they once overlooked can suddenly become impossible to ignore. And then comes the harder realization, their own responsibility.
It is one thing to admit, intellectually, that you made mistakes. It is something entirely different to look backward with enough clarity to understand exactly how your actions contributed to the loss. They remember the moments they pulled away when they should have stayed. They remember choosing silence when honesty was needed. They recognize the repeated cycle, moving closer, becoming uncomfortable, retreating, offering just enough affection to keep the connection alive, then creating enough distance to prevent true intimacy. And eventually they can see the entire pattern. They can also see what you endured because of it. They may realize that you continued showing patience, understanding, generosity, and emotional openness, even when they were not giving you the same in return. That realization can create a powerful form of shame. And this is where I want to clarify what it means to say that their betrayal ruined their life. It does not necessarily mean their career collapsed, their friendships disappeared, or their entire world visibly fell apart. Psychological consequences rarely arrive in such obvious forms. The deeper consequence can be much quieter. They may lose access to a particular version of themselves that existed when they were connected to you. Your love may have drawn out qualities in them that their defenses normally kept buried. Around you, they may have felt more open, more emotionally alive, more understood, and closer to the person they could have become without constantly protecting themselves. That version of them was connected to something specific that existed between you. And through repeated withdrawal, emotional inconsistency, and betrayal, they may have destroyed the conditions that allowed that version of themselves to exist. Now they return to the life they had before you, but there is one important difference. Before you, they did not know what they were missing. After you, they do. The independence that once felt empowering can eventually feel limiting. The emotional distance that once looked like strength can begin to resemble isolation. The belief that needing no one was the safest way to live can become much harder to maintain after experiencing what genuine emotional connection actually feels like. They now know what it means to need someone and have that need met with warmth. And that knowledge can stay with them. It does not necessarily destroy them. It does not mean they spend every day consumed by regret, but it can become part of the quiet background of their emotional life. They may experience it in relationships that never quite reach the same depth, in peaceful evenings that somehow still feel incomplete, in moments when they stop distracting themselves long enough to remember what they lost. And perhaps the deepest consequence is this: the betrayal did not only change what they lost outside themselves, it changed who they became inside themselves. There is something I have come to believe through psychology and through watching how people respond to the choices they make. We become shaped by what we repeatedly choose when life gives us moments that truly matter. That does not mean people are permanently trapped by their past. Human beings can change. They can become more aware, more courageous, and more emotionally honest. I believe deeply in that possibility. But our choices still leave a mark. Every time we choose protection when vulnerability was possible, protection becomes a little more familiar. Every time we disappear instead of staying present, withdrawal becomes easier the next time. Every time we hurt someone who deserved honesty because facing the situation required more courage than we could access, we create a little more distance between the person we are and the person we could become. The avoidant who betrayed you did not make these choices only once. They repeated them. And repetition strengthens patterns. Every withdrawal made the next withdrawal easier. Every emotional retreat reinforced the belief that distance was safer than intimacy. Every moment of withholding made genuine openness feel more unfamiliar. Eventually, the very defenses that were originally created for protection can become the structure someone lives inside. So the betrayal did more than end a relationship. It reinforced the wound that helped create the betrayal in the first place. The walls became a little stronger. The emotional defenses became more automatic. The distance between their authentic self and the version of themselves they present to the world became easier to maintain. And eventually, they have to live inside the life those patterns created. That life may look perfectly functional.
In fact, avoidant people can sometimes become extremely good at functioning. They can work, socialize, achieve goals, maintain routines, and appear completely fine from the outside. Someone looking at their life may even assume they are successful and emotionally unaffected. But external functionality does not tell you everything about someone's internal world. Behind that functioning can exist a private awareness of what was once possible, but was never embraced, of what was offered but never properly received, of something genuine that appeared in their life and was not treated with the value it deserved. Now, I want you to think carefully about what you do with all of this.
Because I understand why a subject like this can create a desire for vindication. When someone hurts you and appears to walk away untouched, part of you naturally wants to know that their actions mattered. You want to know that the pain they caused did not simply disappear into nothing. And if hearing that their choices had psychological consequences brings you some relief, there is nothing shameful about that. You were hurt. Wanting confirmation that the person who hurt you was not completely unaffected is a very human response. You do not have to pretend that you are above it or that you never wanted them to understand what they had done. But I want to give you something more valuable than vindication. Because there is a hidden danger in making their consequences the center of your healing. It keeps your attention attached to them. You continue measuring your recovery by what they might be feeling, whether they regret you, whether they miss you, whether they finally understand your value, or whether their life became harder without you. And that means they are still occupying the center of your emotional world. Your story is bigger than that. While they were protecting themselves from the emotional reality of what happened, you were forced to face it. You had to feel the grief. You had to sit with the confusion. You had to process the rejection, the silence, the unanswered questions, and the loss without being able to simply switch your emotions off. You did the emotional work they avoided. You allowed the pain to move through you, instead of building another wall around it. You faced parts of yourself that the experience exposed. And through that process, something important began to change. You did not become less capable of loving. You became more discerning about where your love belongs. Your depth did not disappear. It became stronger. Your capacity for genuine connection was not destroyed by what happened. It was refined by it. The avoidant did not understand what they were risking, because their own defenses prevented them from seeing the situation clearly. They were making permanent decisions while operating from a distorted understanding of temporary emotional safety. They were trying to protect themselves from pain without realizing that the choices they were making could eventually create a different kind of pain, one that came from losing something they could not simply recreate. And those choices can become part of their internal world for a very long time.
But that is not the most important part of the story. The most important part is what happened to you afterward. You developed a stronger relationship with your own worth. You learned where your boundaries needed to exist. You gained clarity about what you will and will not accept. You discovered that love should not require you to repeatedly abandon yourself just to keep another person close. You developed an inner authority that did not depend on someone else's ability to recognize your value. That is not a small consequence. That is the real transformation.
You were betrayed by someone who could not fully understand what they had in front of them. But in the space their inability created, you were given the opportunity to understand yourself more deeply. They may have lost you, but you did not lose yourself. Through the distance, the silence, the disappointment, and the long, difficult process of rebuilding, you came back to yourself with greater clarity than before. And that is something they cannot take from you. It belongs entirely to you. It cannot be undone by their regret, their absence, their return, or their inability to understand what they lost. Because in the end, the most important thing you recovered was never the relationship. It was you.